I call your name, please say present. Kurt Spring,
Present.
Cheryl Wolf,
Present.
Sally Dale,
Present.
Yi Ching Scott,
Present.
and Diab Jarius, that's me, present. So one of the things I always forget to tell people is that you can always reach the planning board via email at planningboard@winchester.us. And any email sent to that address goes to the full board as well as to our town planner, Brian Zakelli. So along with the board tonight, we have Brian Zakelli, our town planner. We have Nancy Palkari, our recording secretary. And we have Brian Manter from the town engineering department, assistant town engineer. So our agenda for this evening is we are going to have an hour-long presentation, opening of our public hearing on 10 Converse Place, a special permit, CBD petition number 14. We will then have an update on the North Main Street study from Josh Fiala of MAPC. We will be joined by the chair and the vice chair of the Climate Action Advisory Committee, where we will discuss how we can work together on sustainability issues coming up before town. At 9:45, we will have planning board updates, and we will review and hopefully approve some minutes. So, Brian, would you happen to have a copy of the public hearing for special permits available? Okay. So we do have a standard set of procedures for a public hearing. What's going to happen tonight is, because this is a complex project and we are looking for input from a number of different boards, and we want to ensure that the public has sufficient time to review the presentation that's being done tonight or made tonight, and get their thoughts together, is we will be having tonight, we're going to give a presentation from the petitioner. Then we are going to be concentrating on the on 53G consultants. These are various consultants that the planning board can ask the developer to provide for the project. So there will be, all of our discussion will be about 53G tonight. And we will have time for the public to weigh in on that. And then at our next hearing, we will open up the floor for all comments from the public, and we will have a considerable amount of time set aside for that. So I just want to let people know that we will be coming back for full public comments, but we do want to get the 53 consultants lined up tonight. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the public hearing of the Winchester Planning Board. We won't have you sign in, but please note that if you do speak during the public hearing part, for the public comment part, please state your name and where you live. And we are here to review a petition to develop a 10 Converse Place in the downtown. We will be having a public hearing component where we're discussing consultants. And so, as I just said, when you speak, please let us know who you are and where you live, and whether you are, how you are connected to the project, or whether you are a town resident. If you have questions for the, in particular, again, about 53G consultants, please direct them to me, and I will ask the petitioner about those. We will then move on to presentation by the applicant. Town planner will present any memos from town staff, or I'm sorry, memos and letters. We will any that have received by the board. Then we'll get comments from town staff, in particular just about 53G. We don't have any comments from other boards yet, and that's why we're going to put off discussing those until our next meeting. And then, Brian, if you scroll up again a little more, we can get to number 7. This is the part where we will be taking open comment on 53G consultants. We will have a board discussion. We will get to number 9. And then at our next meeting, we will loop back all the way back to number 5 and open it up for full discussion. So with that out of the way, I know there's a full team from the Converse Place development here. Which of you is going to be doing the presentation?
I think, Mr. Chairman, Ian Gillespie has drawn the short straw.
Okay. Now, I know that there are, Brian, somewhere in here, there's a description of how much time, and I missed it. Presentation by the applicant. You have 15 minutes with an extension up to 10 minutes. So if you'd like, you could have a full 25 minutes. So.
Thank you very much. Should I go ahead and start?
Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure both the chair and the board would be happy if we were brief. So we will do what we can. And thank you for inviting us to join you this evening. We're pleased to be reviewing with you, of course, the plans for 10 Converse Place. Just in the way of history, we've had several advisory meetings on this project with the previous planning board and with their consultant, Dennis Carlon, and with Brian Zakelli. We separately met with Brian and Dennis several times as well. If you saw the prior drawings, you will see many modifications tonight that were the result of those comments from the board. Of course, we will continue to refine the project with your input going forward. I'm Ian Gillespie of Gillespie and Company, and I'm part of the development team. And I'm joined this evening by Jan Steenbrugge and Paul Sutley, who are my colleagues and friends. Their firm is known as Ad Meliora. So if we can share a screen, we have Rob Clocker with us from Hassim Associates. There he is. And would it be acceptable to share screen, Brian?
Yeah, Rob should have privileges now.
I thank you very much. And so with that introduction, and Rob, we might go to the next slide when you're ready. Yeah, I'd like to take a moment to remind folks of the regulatory context in which we planned this building. Some of your audience will remember the 13 years of master planning for the Central Business District from 2002 to 2015. At the 2015 town meeting, the planning board proposed rezoning the CBD. And I know a couple of people here spoke. The idea was to re-energize the downtown. So to put our presentation in context, we'd like to review with you briefly the planning board's presentation to town meeting when they suggested the zoning that is the context for this project. So these are the planning board slides we're looking at to town meeting in 2015. So how did we get here? Of course, all the studies. The conclusion was that the zoning was badly out of date. There had been little investment, and the town center was very important to residents, obviously. The goal of the new zoning was to add residential housing and to extend the retail districts. The idea was to have 200 new units over the next 10 to 15 years. So this was a fairly ambitious proposal that the planning board was making to town meeting with this new zoning. It's quite aggressive. Again, the intent was to revitalize. The idea was to encourage mixed use, and we have incorporated retail and restaurant space at the streetscape with residential above. We have heard and taken to heart often the need to maintain the aesthetic. We'll keep coming back to that issue. The board felt comfortable with the idea of going to plus or minus 60 feet. Again, these are the planning board slides to town meeting to give town meeting an idea of what the planning board thought would be appropriate to start bringing into the downtown, into the CBD, into the Central Business District. Finally, the board wanted a diversity of housing by bringing both smaller units and 15% affordable units to the center. And we have included those in our project. What also changed, as I'm sure you remember, was that the permit granting authority, which had been the Zoning Board of Appeals, was changed to the Planning Board within the Central Business District. The town meeting approved the Planning Board's proposal overwhelmingly with a 92% affirmative vote. So the Planning Board did a very good sales job, and I know Brian Kelly was very much part of that, and I know Diab spoke. So if we could do the next slide, please, Rob. Our team, Ad Meliora, as I mentioned, Jan Steenbrugge, who's our majority partner, and Paul Sutley, who's president of Ad Meliora. Our attorney is Mark Johnson. He's not with us this evening. Hassin and Associates are an extraordinary firm. You're going to hear from David Hassin as he takes us through the project tonight. With him are David Tebenkin, Rob Clocker, and Danica Kane. So the architectural firm, if you aren't familiar with them, please look them up. Beals Associates, I've had the pleasure of working with Larry for 30 plus years. I only learned in the past 3 years that he lived in Winchester. Copley Wolf is arguably the best landscape design firm around. And John Copley is, as an aside, is not only an extraordinarily talented architect, he also knows that he is in the land of Olmsted and Kellaway. So he's very aware when you see his drawings, he's aware of where he is, as are we. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, David Hassin. And I hope David's here. There he is. He's muted.
Thank you.
There you go. Hey.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for whoever unmuted me. First of all, I just want to say thank you for that lovely introduction, Ian, and what a pleasure it is to be back in front of you. I want to say hello to the planning board and welcome the new planning board members, and tell you that all of us are very excited to show you what we're going to show you tonight. A lot of it reflects, as Ian mentioned, some of your feedback, and we're looking forward to more and working closely with you to develop a project that we can all be excited about and proud of. So next slide, please, Rob. So our key project goals are first and foremost to create new housing within the center of the town, and to create a meaningful, publicly accessible open space on the Mill Pond. We also know that the goals are to include new retail space, to expand the retail district, and make the whole retail district more vibrant and put retail where it's needed. We've been asked to make sure that there was a diversity of unit sizes, as well as the 15% affordable workforce housing. We have spent quite a bit of time with the CBD's design guidelines, the elements of form, and we are absolutely committed to meeting the goals of that as well. And of course, being the world that we are inheriting, achieving the highest sustainable design goals for the site and for the Winchester Climate Action Plan specifically are part of our proposal. Next slide, please. This is a photograph from 1946 showing the site highlighted in the lighter gray. And we wanted to introduce this historic slide in part because we always start with the history of our sites, but also to remind everyone that this site has been traditionally occupied with a variety of buildings and structures throughout its history. In this case, a series of industrial buildings, laundry buildings, outbuildings, and a church that very much filled out the site in those early years. Another important point is that the site sits within the PUD3 zone, which you see outlined in red, within the East Core zoning district of the CBD. There are many like on any site, but in particular on a site that is a waterfront site, there are many restrictions, many setbacks, many elements that we're trying to navigate. I won't go through all of these lines except to say that what we've done is shown you here all the different setbacks and restrictions on the site so that we can show you the buildable area of the site. We're happy to answer questions about this later on, but the buildable area of the site, which is shown in the pale peach color, which is the site after a number of these easements have been applied to the property. As to the elements of form, I'm sure the planning board is very familiar with them. I'm not going to go through them in detail, except to note that the key elements of the elements of form, such as height and massing, scale, proportion of elements, the street wall setbacks, the details and the facade articulation, and the transparency of ground floor spaces are all things that we have taken a close look at. And we recognize that what we're showing you tonight is a moment in time. It's a process. We know we have work to do. This is not a final design. This is a schematic design that represents our latest thinking in response to many of your comments, and we're looking forward to getting your feedback on that. Now, this is a slide that will help orient you to many of the slides we're going to be showing you later. North is on the up. You see the shape of the mill pond, the central business district, and the important buildings that surround the pond, such as the public library and town hall, which I'm looking forward to getting back to at some point soon, and our site at 10 Converse, which I think the important thing that we wanted to tell you about our reaction to this site is that it is a site with 4 distinct sides that are each a little bit different from the other, and that we have tried to treat with a different architectural response while unifying the architecture of the whole, making sure that each of the building facades responds to the specific conditions that they abut. For example, on the northern facade, the Mount Vernon Street facade, we are proposing to extend and activate the existing streetscape that lines Mount Vernon Street by echoing the existing sidewalk dimensions and character and wrapping that around the site and ultimately creating a gateway condition to the eastern and Mill Pond facade. On the eastern facade, one of the comments that we got from the planning board earlier was to make that facade relatively calm, residential scale, and a nice backdrop to the architectural vigor of Town Hall. And so we have definitely taken a look at that. Along Converse Place, the goal has been to broaden Converse Place to open views and make it a more positive pedestrian environment that will allow people from Mount Vernon to see and traverse across the site directly to the mill pond, creating what we hope will be a very permeable site condition, another little lane, another little quirky space that helps define the character of the village. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, setting back the massing of the building to create an important open space along the mill pond that is publicly accessible and that opens up views to the town hall and other important buildings from the bridge, from the Main Street Bridge, and throughout and around the mill pond. We are, of course, aware that one of the wonderful things about the mill pond is just the pedestrian environment, the ability to walk around it and enjoy it, the fact that there's an important bicycle pathway that extends from the south to the north that passes through the site. And so we are trying our best to accommodate that within the landscape and also create this important focal point, which is where the asterisk is, which is that public gathering point, a place along these paths to really take in the spectacular surroundings of this part of town. Now we've made some important changes on the site and ground floor plan, again, largely in response to many of the comments that we heard over in previous months. We have relocated the retail to the waterfront and created a new, hopefully, cafe or food use along the retail edge to really help activate the public open space on the waterfront and make it feel public rather than private. As some of you may recall, we used to have the building lobby located in that location. Instead, we have flipped the building lobby to the corner of Mount Vernon and Converse Place, which is a good place for visibility, for a building lobby, for drop-off, vehicular drop-off, and so forth, and makes the lobby entrance part of the character of the town. We have introduced, again, at the behest of some of the commissioners, residential uses on the eastern facade at grade, including entrances, a series of unit entrances, townhouse-type entrances along the eastern facade to give that a much calmer residential character. And finally, along Converse, but that's shown in blue. And finally, in Converse Place, the developers have made the decision to invest in a lift system for parking, which greatly reduces the amount of ramping and so forth that would be necessary to park cars below grade and makes for a better Converse Place facade. So those are some of the changes in the program that we've introduced around the site. And the next slide also reflects some comments that we heard about ensuring that there was a diversity of unit sizes throughout the project. So we have 60 units now. We recognize that some of them might end up getting combined by unit buyers at some point in the future. But we have developed a mix of units that include studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. You can see the mix on the table on the lower right. And also a series of units that aren't cookie cutter, but each will have their own special character, unique views, and really create what we hope will be a diverse community within the building itself. Finally, on the penthouse floor plan, we've really tried to think a lot about the profile of the building against the sky. Of course, this is something from the elements of form. We've worked to set the penthouse floor pretty significantly back on all 4 facades, introducing private outdoor spaces that we hope will be green and planted and lush and will help give the building a soft profile against the sky. The parking, as I mentioned, we're talking about an automated parking system, which you'll be seeing more and more of throughout the region as they've become more popular and permitted. This allows us to have much less excavation close to the mill pond edge, park more cars more efficiently, and reduce the impact of the parking at grade. We will, of course, be including such things as EV charging, and happy to answer more questions about this system. We just recently installed one nearby here in the south end of Boston. Okay, someone's showing me a watch. I got to move faster. Copley Wolf. This is a sketch that Copley Wolf's design, which shows this idea of Converse Place being pedestrianized. The term is a Woonerf. It's a Dutch term. The idea is that it's paved to allow for pedestrian and vehicular traffic. A very lush landscape on the east side, this new lawn space facing the waterfront, and continuing the brick sidewalks and character of the street. We'll be able to go into this in more detail with Copley Wolf at some point, but we really want a lot of input on, what the character of this space is, the seating spaces, lawns, access to the water, et cetera. But this is a detail we can come back to. Copley Wolf, this is their slide, really showing that we've done some careful studies about the materiality and character of Winchester, and that all of that will be incorporated into the landscape design. Let me quickly walk you around the building as it currently stands. Again, this is a snapshot in time. This is a view of Mount Vernon looking towards the town center. We have the expression of a 4-story facade along Mount Vernon Street with retail storefronts, paired windows, etc. Looking down on the east side, a much more residential townhouse character. Rob is speeding me up. This is Mount Vernon looking east towards the town hall. Again, the scale of the 4-story expression is the dominant scale with a setback for the upper floors. Looking down Converse Place with its articulated facade that we're really trying to make sure that this doesn't feel like a blocky building, that it has character on each elevation. These are windows that face both into town and towards the water. And this is that Wooten space that I was telling you about, that pedestrianized street, very open with views of the water, paved with high quality materials. This is a view showing the new entrance to the building lobby and drop off at the corner and the new sidewalks. This is a view we're very excited about. This is now, as I said, the entrance to a cafe restaurant type space, activating the edge of the public space along the waterfront. The facades, I hope, begin to give you a hint of the French balcony railings and stone surrounds and brick detailing that we're hoping to incorporate into the facades. And as you look down the Converse Place, you see the windows with French balconies all facing back towards the water. A view of the curved facade that basically the public space nests into. Next slide. We're in the middle of the water. This is the expression of the townhouse facades down the eastern side of the building with the expressed dormers and terraces up above. And this is again a view from really from the pond looking back. It's not a view that anyone will really actually experience very easily, but we want it. It's a good way of understanding and seeing the overall scale of the building. And then we did this photo composite. I'm almost done. We did this photo composite of a view from Main Street Bridge as it stands today, with the pond full of water, and as it might look with the proposed project dropped in. So you can see how the building has been pulled back, the scale has been dropped, and we're really trying to bring the character and materiality of the town into the building as it creates space along the waterfront. Finally, these are some slides which some of you may have seen before, which shows the building in section in the context of the overall topography of the town. We believe that, as you can see in these site sections, first down Mount Vernon Street, below that through the Mill Pond. Next slide, please. The next slide through Converse Place, and finally the site section from the Lincoln School through Mill Pond into the town, showing how the building and its overall scale fits into the what I would call generalized topography of roofscapes of Winchester. Now, lastly, we have included some of the elevations. We recognize these are sketch elevations that we are very much looking forward to getting into you with. These are not necessarily the final Muntin patterns or brick details, but it's just to give you a sense of what we've been thinking about on the 4 sides. So this is a view of the Mount Vernon facade, a view of the curved facade facing the waterfront, the Converse Place facade, which again, you're never going to see these facades in quite this way, but just to show you the composition, the different scale of windows, the paired windows, the larger French balconies, the changes in materials. And lastly, the what I call the townhouse facade, which appears longer here because you're also seeing the curve of the facade breaking back. But this is the quieter facade that would be facing back towards Town Hall. And I didn't want to end the presentation without mentioning, of course, that the project has very high sustainability goals, not just to, and other goals, not just to create affordable housing that is walkable to transit and that is a walkable neighborhood, but that we will also be proposing stormwater management, an all electric building, meeting many of the Commonwealth's goals for a sustainable future. And we're really looking forward to implementing this at every level of the design. And I know, lastly, I just want to, first of all, thank you for your time. I know I went a little over. I also want to acknowledge that we sent in our package to you other drawings that detailed some of our interpretation of the elements of form and where some of the building rhythms and details that we're looking forward to getting into deeper with you have come from. I didn't want to run through all of that. I wanted to make sure that we had time to talk, but we have those slides in an addendum and they're absolutely available to pull up as necessary. So thank you very much for your time. And I'm happy to answer, me and the rest of the team are happy to answer questions or hear your comments at this point.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
just want to note that with the level of water that is currently in that pond, some of your views from the water actually are physically possible right now. So,
Well, that is true. Well, we noticed that as well.
At this point in our hearings, if the design team is done for now, then we're going to switch over to the next part of our procedures. And Brian, I believe that is to bring in public comment. Go ahead.
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, it's memos and letters that a summary of memos and letters that I've received, or that the planning board has also received. I can do that now, and then after that we go to town staff memos, which would be at this point engineering and planning. So the summary of the memos and letters, I've received 5. The planning board has also received these letters. Generally, that people are for the project, they're for housing, but they have parking concerns. Nearly all 5 of these were related to parking, and that these are neighbors that are on Converse Place and Mount Vernon. Yes, Converse Place and Mount Vernon. So yeah, I guess the summary is that there are parking concerns that for visitors, and that potentially 1 spot per unit is not enough, because some bedrooms could have more than that, and what are they going to do with the cars? So this is, but people again are generally for the project, just have parking concerns. So that is the summary so far. We're expected to get more public comment before our next meeting on the 26th. So you can, like Diab said, you can send all of your written comments to planningboard@winchester.us.
Excellent.
Sure.
Thank you.
Then the next is memos from town staff or other boards and committees. The Historical Commission and Design Review. They were actually at the Historical Commission's meeting last night, but we were going to get official correspondence from the Historical Commission and Design Review at our next meeting on October 26th. Brian Manter from the Assistant Town Engineer is here from the Engineering Department, and he can briefly explain the memo from the Engineering Department. Brian, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. The Engineering Department has received the special permit application for 10 Converse Place. But due to the complexity of the project and the site, we recommend that the planning board use their powers to invoke Chapter 53G to hire a peer review team to evaluate stormwater and drainage elements of the project, as well as traffic-related issues. We recommend the planning board consider VHB for the stormwater drainage component, and that we recommend that planning board consider tool design for the traffic review aspect of this work. Both these firms have experience with the town of Winchester and have successfully completed peer reviews on similar projects. Additionally, the Engineering Department requests that the Conservation Commission be a part of this review, and that the board coordinate stormwater review with the commission. In addition, the engineering department will conduct a review of the project, specifically looking at the utility connections, sidewalks, locations of light poles and telephone poles, and with DPW to make sure that that the physical components of the project are coherent. Okay.
Okay, our youngest member of the planning board has apparently been silenced. But thank you for your input. Thanks, Brian. Brian Manter.
You're welcome.
Brian Zakelli, please continue.
Sure. So I had not planned on going through my entire memo in its entirety. I was planning on going through the consultants that I had recommended, but it's kind of up to the board. Obviously, the board has my memo, and it is a public document. I don't think I need to go through that, but I would like to highlight just a few things related to potential consultants. So as far as traffic and transit oriented development and looking at circulation, I would recommend to hire Tool Design as an outside consultant, again, through the 53G review process to do a to do a peer review of the applicant's traffic analysis and circulation within the site. And then as far as design goes, like David Hassine said, there's going to be some need for refinement in a number of elements. And I recommended hiring an outside design consultant to help refine these, as well as other areas, giving particular attention to the tenets of the CBD rules and regulations governing design, and recommended Dennis Carlone, the consultant who is used to develop these regulations, to help implement them in this project. He's been involved with these and other projects in the Center Business District, and I feel his expertise, knowledge, and history of the site makes him a really strong candidate to move this project in the planning board's direction. That is all we have for staff memos, Diab.
Thanks. I just, do you have any idea at what stage Concom is in reviewing this?
That is for the applicant. They have not applied yet, and
Okay.
typically it is a concurrent. That is a part of my memo, as you saw, that there should be some at least coordination at some level. But in terms of when the applicant will file an NOI, that will be a question for them.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of aligning schedules and sharing expertise. So at this point, I believe we are at, I forget what number we're at. We're at 7, 8 on our procedures.
So it is, we're at 7, which is after the comments from town staff and other boards, which we're going to hear the rest of those other boards at our next meeting. Going to the next step is opening of the public comment period. So I can, and like you said, this was related to 53G, but you can take it from here, Diab, on 7A.
Yeah, let's just see so we are at 10 after 8, and we are, our hearing is going to go until 8:30 this evening, so we have 20 minutes. So why don't we, I'd like to open up to the public now. Why don't we give, again, we're going to have plenty of time for general discussion on the project. Why don't we set aside 8 minutes for public comment? We're just talking about what sort of consultants, 53G consultants, for those who aren't familiar with that. 53G is a section of the Mass General Laws, which allows, in this case, for the planning board to request the petitioner or let's call them petitioners, to request that they hire consultants to review parts of their project. Did I get that right, Brian?
Well, we hire them.
Oh, okay. We
They
hire
pay
them.
they pay for it. It's a
Okay.
nice deal. It's a nice deal.
It's a nice deal. Brian set
Yeah.
me straight on that. So
Yeah.
we hire them, they pay for it. It's always good. So why don't, if there are members of the public who would like to discuss areas they think that we need consultants for, let's see if I can figure out.
Yeah. Is it Lee Wooten, and then we'll go Paul Lonnie after that.
Okay, so Lee Wooten, please, if you could state your name. I apologize if I mispronounced it.
No,
And,
no, you addressed it correctly. Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Can you give us your where you reside and your connection, if any, to this project?
Yes, I live at 7 Dix Terrace. Which is close to the center of town, so I'm acutely aware of what goes on in the center and very sensitive to it. I'll try to make my comments brief, but let me address the elephant in the room. The 10 Converse Place is proposed is too large overall. Let me repeat that for emphasis. It's too large. It dwarfs the other buildings in the center and dominates the landscape. It needs to be smaller. All the dimensions are too large. The average and apparent height of the roof line, even before including the mechanical units.
Excuse me, Mr. Wooten, I hate
Yes.
to interrupt, but we are opening it up just in terms of consultants. So do you have a particular consultant you think would help us with this project? Like, we're going to open up to general comments about this project at our next meeting. We have a limited time this evening, so just consultants, please.
I have, other than to suggest someone who can evaluate the context of the building within the town center and its compatibility, both with the other buildings and its sensitivity to the future residents of the structure because of the extreme width of the building creates units that are pretty narrow and pretty deep and will be, in my mind, darker and inappropriate for a living unit for either a family or an individual for our future residents.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope to hear from you when we open up the floor to more general discussion at a future meeting. Next was that Paul Lonnie, Brian? You're keeping track of who's next, right?
Yep, it'd be Paul Lonnie and then Dennis Dale after that.
Okay, Paul Lonnie, please, if you state your name, where you reside, and your connection to the project.
Yeah, hi there. Paul Lonnie. I reside in Los Angeles, but the company I work for is headquartered at 48 Mount Vernon. So attending on their behalf to get a little bit of info. I'm realizing now this question might be better for the next meeting, but specifically, we're wanting to just get an understanding of the timeline of when this is all happening, as there may be quite a bit of potential impact to our business, given the proximity to the project. So is there somewhere online that can be viewed? I didn't see any slides about that in the deck. Could you point me to a resource that talks about
that? Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know that we have a timeline right now. Could you identify the company that you're associated with at 48 Mount Vernon?
Yeah, sure. It's called the Nolan Group.
The Nolan Group, okay. And I think the timeline, I will ask that of the developer when we get around to discussing things. And I think that we're in early stages right now if they haven't filed an NOI to the Concom yet. So I don't think it's available to answer your question.
All right. So would it behoove us to then put all these questions and direct them to planningboard@winchester.us, and then they'll be addressed at the next meeting?
As much as possible, yes. If you have particular questions, then yes, send it to us. And at the next meeting, we will go over the answers that we can provide. And I think we're going to be doing that for all of the hearings. Any questions we have that we can't answer right away, we'll make sure they're available at the next hearing.
Exactly.
All right. Will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian, who would be our next?
Dennis Dale.
Okay, Dennis Dale, if you could state your name, where you live, and any connection to this project, if any.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dennis Dale, landscape architect here in Winchester at 147 Cambridge Street. I think it might be nice if we actually looked at another architectural review person besides Dennis Carlone. He has been so intimately involved in this project that it might be really refreshing to have someone who has a completely different perspective on the project and is more open to looking at the project from the village side as opposed to trying to make this building a monumental structure. It's the same thing with tool design. They are doing so many projects in town that for them, this is just another project. It might be nice to get some new blood in town to do this. And there are a lot of really competent parking engineers, and that could be looked at as opposed to tool. And the third thing is VHB, the same thing. There's another firm in Woburn right nearby, Linden Engineering, that does peer review. A smaller firm might get more intimate review from them because they're a smaller firm but have much knowledge in terms of working with towns and providing peer review. So those are my suggestions. That I'll hold my comments on the building and the awkward perspective drawings to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have time for one more.
Jamie Duvall.
Okay, Jamie Duvall, if you could state your name, where you reside, and your connection to the project, please.
Yeah, thank you. I am Jamie Duvall, and I live at 7 Dix Terrace, and I look over the center. And I just actually am hopping on to second what Dennis said, especially in regards to design concepts, ideas. I think Dennis Carlone comes from Cambridge, and he's a good, more city, Cambridge, Seaport, kind of the bigger scale, more urban aesthetic. And I think Dennis used the word village. And I think in our zoning, we have the word small town character. And I think it would be great to get a fresh perspective. And I was really happy that the design presentation started with that site context. Is that what it was called? The 3 buildings on the site, the industrial laundry building, another outbuilding, and a church. And I feel like that scale of 3 separate buildings works better than the monolith that we're looking at. And if somehow we could just get a good, fresh start. I feel like what I'm looking at now is sort of what I looked at last year, whenever we were talking about the other iteration. And I just think some fresh eyes would be a very good idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are now at 20 after. And so I think at this point we go to the board, and why don't we open up discussion to the board? I think we do have to come to a decision as to our consultants this evening in order to make sure this project proceeds apace. Of course, the board can decide otherwise. So why don't we open up to the board, and if you could make a brief statement, let's say give everyone about a minute and a half if you have something you want to say about the consultants, or if we need more consultants or a different type. Go ahead. Who would like to go first? I think I Ching, you have raised your physical hand. So why don't you head and go first?
Okay. I know that the board has been trying to find different consultants for a while, and we keep pushing it back. And I agree that well, I've never worked really with Tool or Dennis Carlone. I'm new to it, but it does seem like it's been those two for a couple of things already. And I know we submitted some lists of people we thought could be considered. I think Sally and I both did, and we never got to that discussion. So I might suggest that we do that, but it seems like it's going to take a while to interview and come to an agreement. But we just kept putting that off.
Okay. Wow, the planning board is all lined up in the same spot on my Zoom screen. This is just amazing. Sally, you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you. I agree with I Ching that I think that it would be great, and also with Dennis Dale, that I think it would be great to bring some new perspective into the peer review process. With regards to tool design, they are doing a lot of project work for the town, it's up to them to say whether they would be spread too thin, but I think this project calls for some very special parking review, particularly with regards to the special technology involved in the garage, but also with regards to the impact of the proposed project on the flow of streets. And I looked at some of the traffic flow numbers and they didn't seem to jive. I didn't understand how they could be. So I do want us to come up with a different traffic engineering and parking consultant. And with regards to design, I think that Dennis Carlone, being the author of the regulations governing development in the Central Business District, has had a lot of opportunities to speak to the design of this project. And I have to agree with one of the members of the public who said that what we're looking at, with some important changes in the layout of the use of space on the first floor, seems to be the same thing that we've seen all along. And I think that having a fresh perspective, applying the letter of the design intent of the regulations to this building would produce some really helpful direction for design modifications that would make it feel better to the town.
Yep.
Okay.
And I agree with I Ching that we should interview some candidates, and we should do so quickly, even if it takes some special meetings.
Okay, that is an unusual request to have more meetings. Let's see, next in line, Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm as you noted, yeah, at the beginning, I'm new to the board and to this process, so I'm doing a lot of listening, and I think I think, yeah, generally what I'm hearing, I think the sentiment certainly on its face makes sense to me, that if there's just been consistent use of the same groups to evaluate similar, challenges or similar questions in terms of, traffic and land use and whatnot in town, it seems very reasonable to me to consider, exploring alternative viewpoints just to get other perspectives, to mix in along with the ones we've already received. So I would be supportive of that approach. I think that, to be sensitive of timing for everyone involved. I mean, I'm the last person to suggest additional meetings, but I think, to be fair and respectful to, the applicant in the process, I think it would behoove us to try and move quickly to be responsive.
Okay, Cheryl? Thank you, Kurt.
I'm entirely in agreement with what has been said about hiring someone besides Dennis Carlone in this situation for this project, and I'd like to see that go forward. As far as tool design, though, being that they are involved in a study currently with the town of Winchester, I think this problem solving would only enhance their understanding of the mindset of the town and the needs of the town. So I think having replacing tool would not be practical. I think we should keep them on, but I think for design, I agree with Jamie Duvall's view of making sure we understand the village aspect of and commercial vibrancy of the town center through the design of this building.
Okay, so my 2 cents is that I have been happy working with Dennis, and I think that he brings an awful lot of vision and design sensibilities and practical skills to the job, but I guess I am in the minority. I do agree with Cheryl that Tool is in the midst of doing a I don't know if I don't want to call it a traffic study, but they are doing a study in downtown, and I think that extending that, having them coming in is it would build upon the knowledge they're already getting from that study. So I think that would make sense. I have no comment on VHB. That's actually up to the, as far as I'm concerned, that's up to the engineering department to make a decision because they're the ones who have the expertise in determining which ones they feel most certain will do the best job. That's not my bailiwick. So so I believe we are going to be looking for a new design consultant. The majority of the board seems to think that. That means we are going to have, I don't know what the time scale is in terms of interviewing and bringing someone on board. I think we're just going to have to see how quickly we can get this done. So I think we're going to have, I'm just thinking out loud right now. We're going to have a meeting next week, whether we have a short list by then or whether Brian will reach out to people who are on this list that Ching and Sally came up with before then. I think we're going to have to just do I don't know.
Well, we'll coordinate a
Suggestions,
meeting.
Brian.
Yeah, we'll coordinate a meeting for next week. I'm really just to kind of check in and to, I don't know exactly what we'll be doing, whether it'll be narrowing it down or interviewing or what, but the idea is that I understand what the job is. We'll offline, we'll come up with a time to meet next week, for an hour. We'll post it, obviously. That's for design, but we still need votes for traffic and stormwater.
Okay. Ching?
I would change my mind about Tool as well. I think that the point that they are very aware of what's going on in the center would be very helpful and speed things up, I think. So I don't know if it's appropriate, but to make a motion to hire them.
It's appropriate. It's we don't have to make a motion, but we can certainly we can do another straw poll. And you made a motion. What the heck? Someone else, if you want to second that motion, is there a second for hiring Tool? According to the rules, I can't make that motion. So.
Sure, I'll second that.
Okay, so at this point, we would normally have discussion, but looking at the time, I'm hoping we don't have a lot of discussion. Sally?
The one point I would say, and I do agree with Cheryl, that this is an opportunity for us to leverage everything they've learned over a good amount of time about the way cars and people and bikes flow through town, to study this and make sure it all works together. They have a holistic view. I'm concerned, and it's perhaps a VHB issue, about the automated parking system and what its impact will be on the traffic flow in the downtown, considering that it's a relatively new technology. There's not a lot of use of it in this area. And the press on the technology is not particularly favorable. So I think that an engineering review of the parking garage, in addition to a study of the impact of such a system on traffic flow in our town, would be really important.
Can either of the Bryans say something about Tool's ability to do such a study, or is that something that one would need a different specialty to look at?
I mean, Tool did the peer review study for 654 Main Street that also had the same technology or similar, I don't know if it's exactly the same, but similar technology of a lift system. I know, I mean, I think they're just
If
going off
if they
spec.
are-
They're going off specs, and they reviewed it. I think you have to.
If they
decide.
are competent to review it, then that's all I really want to know is.
They
are they-
review. They reviewed it, and it was talked about in the last hearing for 654 Main Street. So the same issue came up, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, then I guess they are, I mean, you're saying they're competent to do this, that we don't need another consultant to specifically.
Well,
review.
I'm not really sure of the question. I guess, Sally, you said an engineering firm to look at the like feasibility of it, or waiting time? I mean, waiting times, it's whatever the spec says is the waiting time, and
Right. I
That's
think
what it
that-
is.
I think part of the peer review process, as I understand it, is to take an independent look at, the specifications of the job, including what kind of a parking system and what brand and manufacturer and methodology and safety record and so on. And I don't know that Tool has that in their expertise. The building that has that parking planned for it at 654, it's quite a different layout. It's a different, and just based on the schematics only, because there are only schematics to look at. It looks like a different application of a similar technology. I would really like an independent parking garage peer review. And if Tool design's not suited for that, they can simply give the best that they have, but I want an outside party to look at that whole design model.
I can say that they are competent enough, certainly, to do something like this, but that's just my opinion.
Well, that's a good opinion. I think that we do have a motion and a second on the floor. We've had discussions. I would like to move to a vote on whether we should approve Tool to do, the motion was for them to do the traffic and parking study, all inclusive, I believe. So why don't we have a roll call vote on that? Sally Dale,
I'm going to say no for now because I don't have enough information.
okay. Kurt Spring,
I'll vote yes. I'm in support.
okay. Cheryl Wolf,
Yes.
I Ching Scott,
Aye.
and Diabjarius, aye. So we have Tool for traffic. It's good that we have a little bit of consonants. And I don't know if there was one of the public commenters expressed a desire to have an alternative to VHB. This is total. I am fine with VHB. I think whatever engineering tells me to do in terms of stormwater and drainage, I just follow their lead. Any other members of the board want to comment?
This is about the engineering review?
This is stormwater and
Stormwater.
drainage.
Yeah, I have no comment on VHB.
Okay, anyone else? I don't see anyone jumping up and down. So I'm guessing VHB is good. If we want to put this on record, would someone make a motion, please?
I make a motion to hire VHB for stormwater
And drainage.
drainage.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, and roll call vote, please. Cheryl Wolf,
Aye.
Kurt Spring,
Aye.
Sally Dale,
I
Ching Scott,
Aye.
Diabjarius, aye. So we've got VHB. So Brian, can you remind me, do we have to specify amounts at this point, or does that come out in the wash at some other point?
Yeah, that doesn't need to be discussed at this time.
Okay, so I think that we can move ahead now with the hiring of VHB and Tool, and the planning board will have a meeting next week to discuss a design consultant. And at this point, I believe that we do have one question about timeline, which I think we can address, bringing it up at their next hearing. And the person who spoke, if you send email to planningboard@us at winchester.us, we'll get your email and we can reply to you directly.
So, yeah, we do need to continue the hearing to a time
Yes.
certain.
Yep. Do we
Yep.
have a time certain?
See, I believe that, so we can't determine, we do need to come up with a time now, meaning if we come up, but if we're meeting on it next week, even to talk about, even if we're all getting together to talk about the peer review consultants, we would still need to, that's when we would actually have to continue it. So I'm actually now thinking that we have to come up with that time certain.
Okay, right.
now.
So let us set a time for next week. Okay, planning board, pull out your calendars. So we are looking at starting on Monday, October 4th. Is everyone of, well, shall we try another Tuesday? Is everyone available?
We could try
7:30?
Yeah, on the 5th,
On the 5th?
on an off planning board week, if we try and just schedule 1 hour.
Why
or-
don't we,
We could schedule more. We can just say that let's go for, all we need to do is do a 7:30 on the, what is that? You
The
just
5th.
said it, the
October 5th,
October
7:30.
5th, 7:30.
Okay,
So someone
so-
does need to make that motion.
So if someone would please make the motion to continue the hearing until 7:30 on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021 for 10 Converse Place.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please. Sally Dale,
Aye.
Kurt Spring,
Aye.
Cheryl Wolf,
Aye.
Beeching Scott,
Aye.
Yep, Jarius, aye. Okay, so the hearing is now, well, it's not closed. It is
Continued.
continued. So thank you very much to the proponents, and we will be seeing much of you in the future, I'm sure. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and who, I apologize that we didn't have enough time for all your comments, but we will have a much longer opportunity for you in the future. It will not be next week. We will just be talking about consultants at that time. But again, send us your emails, planningboard@winchester.us. If you have any questions, we'll try to make sure they get answered. Thank you very much. And now we are moving on to our next part of our agenda, which is North Main Street, I believe.
That's correct. And Josh Fiala is here right on time. I just made him a co-host. So Josh, feel free to share whenever you're ready. So we're just a tiny little bit behind schedule, but we have this agenda item, North Main Street report with recommendations until 9:15. So we have another 35 minutes to go through this and ask Josh questions of all the great work that he and MAPC have been doing for the town related to North Main Street.
And I should point that this is not the last time we will be discussing this. There is a lot in that report, and we will be talking about this a lot in the future. So please go ahead, Josh.
Great. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Diab Chair, and welcome. Thank you, Planning Board. So I'll share my screen. My intention this evening was basically just to briefly walk through that report document with you all on the screen, and then leave ample time for some discussion and questions about the next steps and what might be appropriate for how we go from here. So let me share my screen, and then we'll just scroll through that document and I guess can answer some clarifying questions along the way if there are any, and then we can discuss after that's concluded. All right, so hopefully everyone can see the screen just fine. I've got it opened up to just kind of full spread, so hopefully it's not too small on your screen, but I think this will make it a little easier just to scroll through it. But the report breaks down really, I know that the Planning Board really has been a part of the process, most members through most of this process. So the document itself is really set up to reflect that process and bring people along through the community engagement that occurred. So there's a brief introduction, which lays out the purpose of the study's connection to Winchester's recently completed master plan, and how this is a direct result in implementation of that planning effort. And then outlines the study area, which is the general business district 2 and 3 that you can see on the screen on the left side with the orange and red shaded areas along North Main Street, just up the road from where you were all talking about the project on the previous agenda item. There's a narrative about the history of North Main Street and its significance to the town. And that's combined with a diagram which shows the year built of the current buildings in the corridor that you can see on the screen. And then there's a section which goes through in detail the characteristics of North Main Street today and has a series of diagrams which illustrate several characteristics. So for example, land use or building to land value that you see on the screen, building height and building density. And there's some narrative about each of these characteristics and how they inform the context of North Main Street, really building up to the results of this study, which were zoning recommendations and design guideline outlines. So parking and owner occupied properties, potential change. So we've looked at the combination of characteristics and tried to get a feel for what properties might be likely to have some redevelopment in their future. Walkability in the corridor, thinking about sidewalks, the crosswalk network, curb cuts, and then some discussion around sustainability and resilience as it relates to broader town procedures and programs, and then equity and social justice as well. We, as a group or as a the community partaking in this process, discussed and came up with the components for a vision for North Main Street. So that's outlined in this section 4. We talked through what those community exercises were, what the feedback was, and then it's really focused on this vision statement, which I did, I would say, refine and edit based upon all the final feedback in this draft version that you see here, which was different than the last draft we presented at the second community meeting. And it really focuses on North Main Street as an extension of downtown Winchester, and thinking about the support for small business and economic activity that should occur while enhancing the walkability and quality of life for the residential neighbors along the corridor. And then there are some more specific goals which go along with the vision to help operationalize and make actionable that vision statement. So hopefully these things are resonating as you're able to hopefully take a look at the report when we sent it around. There's also a section on the current zoning, which goes through the uses as they're currently written, the dimensional regulations, and other requirements, including parking and the village center overlay district, and the inclusionary affordable housing. So the recommendations, for actually, because they were for the most part very well supported in the second community meeting, the recommendations, of which there are 15, should look very familiar because they were presented almost in their entirety at that second community meeting. They are represented in the format of the report and include the sort of community responses to those recommendations by the way of polling voting that occurred both in the meeting and following the meeting. And so these are both recommendations, but also you can see the support levels for each of the recommendation, which should be very helpful for the board as you move forward with pulling these towards town meeting. All of the recommendations I would view as pretty well supported. We've done zoning work in many communities in the MAPC region, of course, and when a zoning recommendation is not well supported, it's pretty clear. So these were actually pretty well supported. They included, and I'll just go through them very briefly, but looking at ways to increase the site flexibility by allowing some encroachment by special permit into the defined setbacks, looking at also by special permit the circumstance where a lot could be combined with probably a rear lot of a different zoning district to provide flexibility for redevelopment. And also in these, I should say that there's a more in-depth discussion of each of the recommendations, and hopefully gives you a little more context for what this is about. Focusing on North Main Street frontage, which I think is very clear, allowing or encouraging the side parking access when that's available through a side street for a property, increasing the building height by a half story, but maintaining the height as it's currently defined in the number of feet. We think that has a number of benefits for the district, which we've talked through and also shown through a few diagrams that you can see on the screen. Increasing density would go along with that half story height increase. So we've defined what that may look like. And then also decreasing or increasing parking flexibility or decreasing the parking that is required overall. And I think that helps with the financial feasibility and the density of potential redevelopment. And then looking at increasing predictability by making a few changes in the use recommendations from the current GBD2 and GBD3. Design guidelines and standards, which we built into the recommendations, strengthening the streetscape for more detailed and sort of fine-grained requirements for street trees and other plantings on the site, expanding the inclusion of parks in redevelopment through a % requirement of publicly accessible open space, thinking about some different ways to incentivize preservation. Preservation came up as a topic that was important to many. And this would be potentially a way to allow an addition on a property while still incentivizing the preservation of the historic building when a historic building is present. And then also thinking about incentivizing affordable housing by adding, instead of only capping that height at the 3.5 stories, allowing them to go that extra additional half story to a full 4 stories, we think would have some potential benefits for affordable housing that could be associated with an increase in the % required for affordable housing. And then aligning approvals so that your board, the planning board, would be the special permit granting authority for North Main Street, which it presently is not. And then we have some additional considerations about how these recommendations could be applied in recommended zoning. So I'll dwell on the next steps for a moment here, because I think that's really in part what we're thinking about and looking at from where do we go from here. I think there's a need for, and DW pointed to this in your introduction as well, additional review and discussion, both by, between you all and myself potentially, but also amongst the board and with the community. There, in the appendix of this report, there is initial draft zoning language, but I would consider it that initial draft only. It's not, it definitely needs the benefit of that additional discussion and review. And it can be, I think, is a solid place to start, but should be modified as those conversations continue. Similarly, we've taken an approach where we have an initial draft design guideline language, but it again is a base and a starting point and can be built upon. And all of that would be in preparation for town meeting, which may, has been expressed in the past potentially as the Springtown meeting, but in other towns, the lead up from this point to town meeting, I will say has been longer than that. So that's also to consider, to not necessarily feel rushed or have the community feel like this conversation is being rushed. But if the ambition is also Springtown meeting, I think that's achievable. But just know that in other locations, it's been longer than that too. And then the ultimate goal, of course, with any zoning package is to set it up so that it has success at town meeting, and that it would be a zoning package and set of recommendations that are adopted and passed at town meeting. And then those, because those recommendations are really that useful unless they're actually a part of the updated zoning. So there are 3 appendices that really add a decent amount of pages to this, but we wanted to include them. The first is just a more holistic summary of the stakeholder engagement that occurred. So that includes summaries of the first 2 engagement, really sort of occasions that included both the in-person or I guess a virtual meeting. So we were all live together virtually, but that they also included a follow-up online survey. So the first such occasion included 77 participants, which I think is a very solid turnout for a study of this scale for a district study. And then just scrolling down past all of that feedback to the second meeting, which had and was followed with a follow-up survey for a total of 119 total participants, which are all of that is incorporated into this draft report. So that's, I think, a solid footing to be starting from in terms of where you're at with this, with the draft zoning recommendations. And then so all of that's more detailed feedback that was received through all of those participants. And then the second appendix, Appendix B, is the draft zoning language itself. And I have used, as was recommended to me by several of the stakeholders we interviewed, which is actually shows up here. So these are our summary notes from the stakeholder interviews. I've tried to anonymize them just because they were individual interviews and we don't mean to put anyone on the spot. But these are notes from those interviews, I think, of which there were 12 or 13 in the end, which included North Main Street businesses, North Main Street residents, some board and commission members across the town, I believe a town meeting member or two. So a good mix of population in those interviews. And then the draft zoning language, which I began to say from the stakeholders' recommendation, really started off from the CBD model. I forget what section of the zoning it is, but section H, maybe if I recall. Section, is that right? Section H, which is the CBD zoning section, and then used that as a framework and model to build something similar for North Main Street. And so this would be the recommendation where this is headed, at least in this initial draft, is to collapse and combine what is currently the GBD2 and GBD3 districts into one North Main Street district, which would be governed by this new section. And this section would pull all of those requirements into this one area, which is what you have similar for the CBD. There are changes to the use table, which I've tried to highlight and make clear. There are changes to other items which showed up in all those recommendations I just went through. Those recommendations have found their way into this initial zoning language. So we've tried to be consistent and sort of make actionable those recommendations in this language. And so that's all in there. And a potential, I mean, the zoning map is basically those two areas, which are currently, I did not add or remove any parcels. So it's what's in GBD2 and GBD3 are in this new zoning district. I also recommend that the overlay, the village center overlay district, VCOD, is probably, if you do make this type of change, the benefits of that VCOD overlay are incorporated into the new zoning changes. So the VCOD could effectively go away and simplify the zoning somewhat as well. And then similarly with draft design standards, have started with a base format which had been established by the CBD and followed in that. So hopefully there becomes, if this is a direction that you would all like to head in, a parallel structure is useful because you can start to get a feel for, oh, you know, you're reviewing this project at Converse Place, and then you have a project on North Main Street, and it's a similar framework at least. The content might not be exactly the same in all cases, but the framework is similar so that you get a familiarity with it and can reference items easily. So those design standards are beginning to be laid out, or they are laid out in the initial draft form, which would reflect, in my view, the things that are important from a design standpoint on North Main Street to reflect the vision which has been articulated. And then lastly, I will say though, that there is also the regulations governing the CBD, and those regulations, which are substantial as well, were a little bit beyond, I found, the ability to accomplish within this study. So I basically, like that's I think we might need a little more fuel in the tank or something for accomplishing something of that level. But this, I think, gets you pretty far down the road, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Thank you very much, Josh. There is an awful lot of information in that document. Why don't we have approximately 20 minutes to engage in a discussion about this? And I think the thing to focus really on is what are our next steps? How do we want to move forward now? This is still a draft document, so in that sense, I don't know what we need to do to make it a final document. Josh, do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, I do. So typically, I don't believe I've received any comments from any of you or anyone else at the town. I think there are a few items which could occur. If you all do have questions or comments or edits suggested, you can get those together whenever is convenient. I know that you all have a lot on your plates. But whenever that could occur, certainly we could have a round of revision, which occurs from you all. If I think the other direction from where the current document is you could more publicly release it. As I understand it, the document has been really sent to the board so far. If you all are comfortable enough with its current state, it could be released more broadly to the community for public comment as well, and we could take a look at any of those comments which are received. If you would prefer as a board to get me any comments first, if you've noticed something critical that needs to be corrected before more public release, we'd be happy to integrate those edits prior to the more public release. So that's really up to you. But I would recommend both if you have comments to get those to us. And then also, I would highly recommend a more public comment period of some kind. It doesn't have to be that formal, but give people a few weeks or a month or something like that. And then we'd be happy to take a look at those. Typically, with the public comments, we'll take them in, but there's not a assumption that every single comment received in a public comment period will be integrated into the plan. So will there be a review process, and that review process might occur with you all as well about how we want to handle some comments. And then once that occurs, I think we could take the draft stamp off the document and consider that more finalized. And then hopefully that would set you up for moving into that town sort of pre-town meeting process and outlining what that might look like.
Okay. So I think, well, it is now officially a public document. So at some level, whether we release it wider is moot, because it is part of the documents attached to this public meeting. So
there you go.
That lessens the concern of other board members about releasing it. So with that all in mind, why don't we open up to the board? And I am trying to figure out a schedule for when we want to actually get this document finalized. So if anyone would like to go first while I look at our upcoming planning board schedules, who would like to speak? Go ahead, Sally, please.
So I had a chance to really closely read about half of the draft for review report. And I didn't have a chance to get through all the public comments and refamiliarize myself with the other attachments. What I did hear you say this evening was that the regulations governing the central business district, which is their title, Regulations Governing Section 7.3 of the zoning bylaw, if that's the special number 7.3, that you said you needed more time, more resources to dive into that and do an analysis as how it would relate to North Main Street. So I would be interested to hear you talk more about that. But as far as this being a document that we would comment on in terms of what are the implications, or I guess you're asking for specific edits or things before we can take the word final, take the word draft off of it. And so I would personally commit to get those to you in whatever timeline that we all decide on. I think, time is of the essence because even though it feels impossible, spring will be here really quickly. So backing it out from the Springtown meeting date, I will defer to Diab and Brian and council on what timeline we should follow to get these in front of town meeting. I have very minor edits, just Scrivener stuff, but I want to give you substantive.
Yeah, so if I just do a quick clarification, so the regulations are actually a separate document from the zoning bylaw. And so that is the, I don't know how many, the 20+ page, which goes into more of the design things. So, yeah, so our earliest planning board meeting that we could do this would be the 26th of October, but I don't know that that's actually possible because I know we have ZBA things that we will have to review. And we are full up on all the meetings in between there. So we're going to have to move some of those that are already scheduled in order to get the ZBA petitions in. So I think that.
Sorry, real quick, Dia. The ZBA hearing's on October 21st. So actually, we would have to do anything related to that.
Yeah.
At the 12th.
Right. It's just that the 12th is full. So we're going to have to move stuff from the 12th to our next meeting. So I don't even know if we'll be able to make it on the 28th because that's also our 10 Converse meeting, our next one, or not the 28th, whatever that is.
Yeah.
26th. Thank you. So the earliest we could come back to this board without a special meeting is probably sometime in November, which is insane in terms of, that's like 6+ weeks away. So.
Question, Diab?
Yeah.
I know this is the second time I've used a dirty word in the same meeting, but can we schedule an interim meeting to do a special discussion about this report and to focus on, what we want to change or what we want to reinforce or whatever?
If the rest of the board is willing to put in another meeting, we can fill in. We can have a meeting a week considering what's on our schedule. If we're going to do, we can schedule that offline and discuss that. What I think might be, let me step back from scheduling and ask if the other board members have anything they want to discuss right now.
I wanted to know what the goal was for Springtown meeting. Is it to present a whole new draft of zoning?
The idea would be we would have, yes, we would have new zoning for the North Main Street corridor.
Yikes. It seems really a lot, but.
Yeah, it sounds super ambitious. And I honestly, Sally got through more than I did. So I wish, I really do want to spend some time with your document, Josh. It's enormous. And it's, if we're going to comment on zoning, it needs to be very, it really needs to be evaluated and discussed. So
would a first step be put writing comments in writing to Josh, and then rather than try to do that all in a meeting, maybe we have a deadline to get some comments to Josh, and that'll be next step.
Yes.
Is that allowed for us to do that? To put
you can give comments to Josh, and
okay.
then Josh is not going to share them with any other planning board member, and then we'll share it in a public document when the time comes.
Okay.
Brian, do we include you or no?
Yep. Yeah.
So
you can always send stuff to me. That part's easy.
So why don't we set so we have to work backwards. If we are uncomfortable with spring, and I think I'm also a little, I have some trepidation about that. If we want to move for next fall, then we need to be thinking about having language firmed up by May or June of next year in order to go through public comments. And as you may recall, getting things done before fall town meeting is awkward because of the summer recess, as in everyone leaves town. So if we really want to get this done, we need to be on track to having language ready early next summer. So if we work backward from that, we're going to be doing hearings probably prior to Springtown meeting, as well as after Springtown meeting. So we'll set up a schedule working backwards from that. And I think in terms of using this document as our foundational structure, that I think if we could get comments to Josh by second week of October, is that possible? Today is what is today?
Today's 28th, so that
28th.
would be 2.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks from now.
Yeah. So 2.5 weeks. So that might be the 1, 2. So maybe by the 22nd of October, that's 1. I think my calendar doesn't work. No, the 15th of October, sorry. So the 15th of October, essentially 2.5 weeks. That's a Friday. Josh, have you run out of money? Do we have to still pay you? How much do you have left on your contract?
Our contract was extended through the 30th, September 30th, and I am pretty close in terms of the budget that we were given. So I think the way that I would accomplish it, because there's such a small amount left, and because the paperwork involved with the contract extension is a headache for that amount of money. And I think what we should do is basically, I will expend my time, close out this contract since it's so close. And then I will, within reason, I will do more work with you all in October to wrap it up and get those revisions done. So just kind of leaving that door open, just so we can all be happy with it. I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so why don't, Brian and I will talk to you offline about how much effort you think it might take and whether it's reasonable for you to just finish out the contract to go for an extension. There is money, we do have some money that if we needed to, we could extend the contract. So let's talk about that offline. Is the rest of the board happy with whatever date I just pulled out of my hat, which was the 15th of October?
Yes, and the comments that we would give to Josh, and these are all independent comments, so there's no open meeting law violation. We would give them to him by the 15th, and they would be comments that we would just make, that would be whatever's needed to take the word draft off the report.
Right.
Okay.
So then the next step is
Cheryl, I just saw you wanted to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question. Sorry, Diab, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Because you made a reference when you were talking and presenting that that you were using the CBD planning document or the master plan as sort of a model of what would make this North Main Street successful. And I was wondering, there were case studies in the master plan, and I'm wondering if you had considered as a way of being illustrative about, that might help people imagine the type of zoning that and support, in a town meeting, kind of people imagining how it might be different or work differently than the center business district, because it's a very different environment. Mm-hmm. It should have its own qualities, right?
Yes. I don't mean to, that's I think a good clarification to make as well. So I was following the what I would describe as sort of the outline or framework from a zoning perspective in terms of the sections and the style from the CBD, but the content of that zoning framework, I've tried to model after everything that we've learned from the community about the desire for North Main Street. So it's not that I was taking fully everything from the CBD, it was more just the structure of that zone within your bylaw. And I did not see the case studies in the master plan, but I'll take a look and see if there are applicable case studies from that work, because I know that would be a powerful way to help people understand the benefits of the zoning changes.
Right. I mean, your diagrams are beautiful, and they really help people like create a framework in their mind of how to analyze, but thinking forward and imagining the future of those possibilities. Sometimes it just takes another community that did, bike lanes, or, special drainage that's planted, or, whatever kinds of things that make, that change a corridor like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I just lost my train of thought. Okay, so the next step is public input. And here, so if we certainly should extend it for public to provide input. I think the challenging part will be for the public to realize that this is a sketch, this is a possibility, and they may react very strongly to some of the ideas in here. But as you pointed out, Josh, you might not incorporate those because that's not the point of this document. This document is not the final zoning. So we need to, I don't know how we get this out to the public. We can certainly send it out to, say, town meeting members, put it out on the town's website. I don't know how many people go by the town's website and see what's hot. But I think there are, there's a perennial problem of advertising. But I think if we kept to the 15th and we managed to get something out to, Brian and I can talk about getting something out to town meeting members maybe early by the end of this week or next week. And then if anyone has any ideas of how we actually advertise this stuff, papers don't work anymore. Sally?
Well, I think one of the things that was really helpful to getting a high level of participation in the first and second and the interim offline discussions was because there was a special effort made to really look in the eye of every person on North Main Street and say, would you be involved? And so I think getting a copy of this report, not only to town meeting members, or maybe it's through the precinct town meeting members that cover GBD 2 and 3, to make sure that it gets in the hands of pretty much all the stakeholders. The problem that I have is that it's just what you just said. It's a planning analysis. It's not a final recommendation. Is that right? So people can be really confused about that. Not only, and I agree with Cheryl, not only can people not understand how to visualize what change will do to their built environment, but they might not understand where we are in the process. So I think public engagement is complex at the stage of the final report. The final report is your analysis and recommendations. And as long as people just understand that that's a step towards redoing.
Yeah, so the language which goes out for asking for public input will have to be very carefully written so that, and
all right, well,
anyone who wants to volunteer to write that, please don't step away. I don't know, I'm going to step back as fast as possible. But,
I'm happy to work with Brian and Josh on whatever marketing needs to be done to put this final report into the hands of town meeting residents and key North Main Street North Main Street residents and key stakeholders.
Well, when you say final, you mean draft final.
No, that we're going to finish this draft and to turn it into a final. And it's when we get, I thought that's what we were doing, making this final.
We are, but one of the questions Josh had was, would we want to get comments on this version from the public?
Oh, I see.
Am I, Josh, you're nodding, so I hope I've interpreted what you said correctly.
Well, sorry, I'll interrupt. I think that, so I think the goal for the 15th in terms of what types of comments that we get. So although this is already out in the public, the idea is that this is a draft report for the planning board, meaning that the goal for this 15th out of those, how many strategies do we have, Josh? 18?
15.
15 strategies. So if you have to condense your review, obviously to get that, the context of those 15, you obviously really should obviously be reading the whole report. But in terms of the comments, I think the comments should be focused on those 15 strategies. And the first question is, am I totally against any of these? So is there anything that's crazy, right? So, and I'm not saying, Josh, that there is, but because I don't really think there is. But the idea is that that's kind of the first level of, is there anything that you wouldn't support? I guess that's the easy. Is there anything that you would not feel comfortable going up in front of town meeting and saying, this is a great idea? So that's number one of like, what one can we just cross out? It might be 0. Then the comments should then focus on those 15 strategies in terms of where should you put most of your time and effort. Obviously reading the whole thing, but the comments should be on those strategies. Once we get those comments to Josh, that will be his kind of final work of incorporating the planning board's comments. And then we will push that version out.
Right.
Okay, so I have a slightly different take. And the slightly different take I have is that these are Josh's recommendations based on his work. And that I think that the report should stand on its own, and that after the report is finalized, that's when the board can come in and discuss applicability of these 15 different approaches. At least that was my take, because I feel weird that the board is going to come in and change Josh's research and everything he's done based upon the inputs, and that would, in my mind, change the independence of this report. If I were to ask for an outside consultant to give me their opinion on something, I would say, give me your honest opinion, and I won't change what your opinion is or what your conclusions are, because your report should stand on its own and is your work.
Right. So so then maybe you're talking about whether it's really being more of an analysis of the palatability of these 15 strategies that Josh is showing in front of us, and that we will make decisions based upon that analysis.
Yeah, I know that in other, when we've had other consultants come before this and other boards, they were somewhat distraught when the boards would come in and rewrite parts of their report for them, because it didn't reflect their analysis and work. And I want to make sure that we don't cross the line between clarifications that to make this a report, which maybe, so to make sure language is clear or things like that, versus changing its conclusions, which are those of Josh and his team and not of the planning board.
Right. So when I think about the comments that I would give to Josh, it would be clarifications. It would be, a word was missing, or it was misspelled or something. I mean, just really basic stuff to make it a really clean, tight report. There's no way would I want to change any of his research, because research data is data. You don't change data.
Right. I'm not talking about changing data. I'm talking about recommendations. The recommendations could be all these 15 strategies, 30% fell this way, 30% fell this way, 15% fell this way. What should you do? Then it's a recommendation that the planning board has to make. So I'm not trying to change data.
Yeah, I understand.
That, yeah, well, that's, yeah, I just, Josh, I don't know if you want to.
I think this is, I think in some ways you're both approaches are right, and both will probably play out. I think probably the types of comments that Sally is talking about are the ones that are reasonable, for the 15th. I think the more substantive comments or questions about content may emerge from discussion with the planning board, but they're more likely to emerge as that conversation with the community continues towards town meeting. And so you'll start with MAPC gave us these core 15 recommendations. And then as that conversation continues, those core 15 will turn into the core 10 or the core 8, because you'll find that there are a few probably that the community really isn't on board with. And so in other communities, what has happened is that those recommendations, which are less supported, get dropped off so that the core items, which the community would support and pass at town meeting, can still carry forward and meaningfully impact the zoning to make it a better bylaw.
Right. So the final report is a report of research and recommendations for further discussion by the planning board, stakeholders, and ultimately town meeting. But this is a final report about research and initial recommendations. That's what it is, right?
Yeah, and the board commissioned the study from MAPC, and really it's the findings of MAPC, but it's not necessarily the case that the planning board has to fully endorse everything that MAPC has told you. You in fact could say, on second thought, 3.5 stories, we're not into that. So, that's not a MAPC recommendations, we're behind.
So, would it then make sense to have the board send in our comments by the 15th and then release that, let's call it the truly final document for public comment? If we really want to see the public's reaction to these recommendations, I mean, it's obviously public now. They can start responding if they will. How does that sound?
Fine.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is releasing the project, releasing the report after Josh has a chance to incorporate whatever comments that we make. So, but it occurs to me that we might need to meet the Tuesday after the 15th, even just for an hour, for Josh to ask any final questions he has about our comments before he publishes the final report.
Well, why don't we cross that bridge to another meeting when we need to get there?
Yeah, because we had a 9:15 agenda item.
Yeah. So okay. So I think we've settled on October 15th for getting our comments to Josh. Brian and I will discuss offline the kindness of Josh to finish this out and how many extra hours are how many pizzas we have to give him in order to get through those extra hours, and then we will. Right. And I think we do have another planning board meeting prior to then. So we can bring this up very quickly then. And if we need to make another meeting, we can schedule a meeting then. And okay. Are we all set, Josh?
Could I just add a couple thoughts? I will throw out there too for the planning board members that I would be happy to meet with you individually if that would be helpful. If that's easier than a full meeting of the board. To talk about your comments, or if you'd just like to hear from me or something like that, I'd be happy to offer that. And then the other thing that I would just put out there, so it's in your consciousness, is that the study was graciously and generously paid for by Winchester through your town meeting vote to get this study going. And so I would suggest that you're well positioned for future, like a technical assistance request from MAPC to provide additional staff time for someone like myself or exactly me to join you, to assist you, taking these recommendations for where they are in the report closer to where you need them to be for town meeting. So I think those technical assistance cycles are sometime probably in the neighborhood of December or January. There could be a request. And I think if you said that this study was paid for completely out of the town's funding, and that you're happy with the study and like to continue with MAPC in this effort, that would be looked upon very favorably by our executive director.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Free money is always welcome. Okay. Thank you very much, Josh. Really great to hear from you and see you again. And everyone will write you.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you so much.
Really impressive.
So we are now moving on, and belatedly, and I apologize to the Climate Action Advisory Committee. We are running a bit late. So what we are having now is just sort of an introduction to the CAC. They're going to tell us what they're. Oh, I'm not even going to say. You guys can talk about who you are.
You're doing great, Diab. You're doing great.
Right. And too much coffee today. And how we can work together on sustainability goals in town, both through what's in the planning board's purview, which is zoning and long-term planning, and other things. So why don't we turn it over? We have with us Rick Eno and Priscilla Calabri of the CAC. It's all yours, Rick.
Hey, Diab, thanks a lot. And thank you all for having us here. Looking forward to the discussion. What we're hoping we could get across today is first give you all an overview of the CAAC, the Climate Action Advisory Committee, a quick perspective on how we see sustainability and potential impact and opportunities for the town. But I think most importantly, we hope to get a dialogue between this board and our committee so we can support each other going forward on, for example, just the discussions that you had this evening as sustainability weighs into it. And I'll explain a little bit how we could possibly do that. But I think if we could engage in some conversation and get some ideas, this could be an ongoing dialogue where we can support each other moving forward. So first of all, the Climate Action Advisory Committee will go back and forth between that and CAC, just for the acronym. It's an appointed committee by the select board, and there are 7 members of that committee. I'm the chair, and Priscilla Calabri, who's also on this call as well, she's the vice chair. The members of the committee, just so that in case you know them and you know who's serving on this committee currently, Alan Field has been on it, and just last night the select board announced his replacement as Alan is stepping down, an individual from Winchester named Josh Bears. Jason Roeder's on the committee, Wei Chen, Ruth Trimarchi, and Adriana Garber, is a high school rep. She's off to college, and we'll replace her with a new Winchester High School rep at the next select board meeting. We also have a number of other contributors on an as-needed basis, depending on the issues that are raised, and we meet the second Thursday of every month. I think what's interesting about our committee, and hopefully it's useful to the planning board, is our 7 members bring complementary skills, and that's partially by design of the committee. We have expertise in clean energy, both on a residential and business perspective, expertise in resilience, transportation, particularly on electric vehicles, trash, waste management, as well as businesses and how they approach sustainability. I think the inclusion of a student rep from Winchester High School allows us to tap into the energy of the school system and be able to, touch many, many families through communication through the school system around sustainability. The primary objective of our committee is to support the town in the implementation of the Climate Action Plan. And you probably know this, but just to recap, and really that comes down to 2 big buckets: reducing the carbon emissions in the town and increasing the resilience of the town. Communications keeps coming up, and I think I heard it referenced in this meeting as well, as how do we best communicate with the various members of our town, recognizing people all choose to communicate in a different way. And that's an important task in terms of our agenda going forward. The committee's been in place for about a year since the Climate Action Plan was approved. And what have we been doing in that year? We've been benchmarking other towns, understanding how other towns are approaching sustainability issues. We've had a number of special projects we've pursued. We've looked at communication options. I think importantly, we as a group, we defined with the town the spec for the sustainability director, and we actively participated in screening candidates and interviewing sustainability director candidates. And as you may have heard, Ken Pruitt will be joining as Winchester's first sustainability director in October. And that's a key part of the climate action plan. Our committee is going to be working closely with Ken in order to help fine tune priorities and move forward. And it's a new position. So we really need to, fine tune priorities and the working relationships between this new position in town and our committee. So I think as Priscilla and I were talking about this, we see this meeting tonight with the planning board is really important because, we have an opportunity over the coming months to define how a new sustainability director fits with our committee and how those skills are brought to bear in the town to make the greatest impact that we can on sustainability. So I just got just a couple points on how we see sustainability and some of the kind of opportunities and risks. I think we all agree, and I heard you reference it earlier in the call, that change is occurring rapidly. There is a lot going on around the world in terms of objectives to carbon neutrality, to adapting to stronger storms, and that presents opportunities and risks for us as a town. Opportunities, there's going to be tremendous growth in electric vehicles. There's going to be growth in renewable power. There's a lot of thinking about creative uses of green space, as you've seen in some of the plans put in front of this planning board, optimizing transportation and parking and waste management. These are all things that there are a lot of innovations occurring that members of our committee are trying to be up to speed on and trying to be able to serve as a resource to the town with regards to those innovations. There are also a series of risks, and I'll point out, storms, floods, heat are all things that I think we have to, as a town, to prepare for going forward and understand how are we going to best mitigate those risks. I mean, importantly, I think, my approach to the committee is I don't think anyone has all the answers right now on how to best adapt to a more challenging future, but the options are coming much, much clearer. And I think there are many examples around the world of towns and individuals pursuing sustainability options. They learn, they redo, they get better. And we're at a very steep part of the learning curve. And I think importantly, pragmatic solutions and working together to come up with what's right for our town, what's implementable, and what can be used to bridge differences around this will be very important so that we can work together to try to achieve that. So that's my introduction. I'll take any questions, or Priscilla, if you want to add anything. And then I would love to just have a short discussion in terms of how we can support the planning board in ways that we can work together moving forward. Priscilla, anything from yourself? You're on mute, by the way.
Yes, the one thing I would add is that I'm actually an ecologist by training and background, and am very interested, in addition to waste management, in maximizing ecosystem function in town and planting the greenest and the most that we can for everything from pollinators to humans.
So any questions in terms of the committee? I gave you a rapid fire rundown on the history of it, the members, and what we're doing. Any questions, or if we want to jump into ideas or dialogue and what we can do with you?
I do have one question. Dieb, is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
So it occurs to me that the zoning bylaws, because they were written before climate catastrophe was even a twinkle in our eye, or maybe not before, but not as much as. Do towns do sort of an audit of their zoning bylaws to identify opportunities for increasing the sustainability practices of the town? So for instance, we would, and I don't know, maybe it's the building department that has to impose specific building changes, or maybe it's the universal building code that changes and trickles down at the town level. But I wonder if there's a way that we could either look at what other towns have done, or that we could partner with the sustainability or climate action advisory committee and the sustainability director to sort of go through the hit list of things that zoning bylaws can do
Yeah, and I think, Sally, that's a great point. And I think the short answer is I think it's happening all over the world, that there's an evolution occurring in different towns, different cities, or at different points on that evolution based on where their needs are and their current situation. One of the things we've done is to try to benchmark some of the local towns in terms of things such as communications, such as EVs, but the zoning requirements and building codes, we didn't even think about that as a committee in terms of just our brainstorming where we should start. But that would be, I think, an excellent kind of initiative to be able to understand what others are doing and try to learn from that. Because I know we've talked as a committee, the more we can learn from others, the lower our risk is and the more effective we're going to be. So I think that's I don't have the answer to all the details, Sally, but I think that being able to pursue that collectively would be a great objective.
Right, and I should say the planning board has enough on its plate that it could probably meet twice a week for the next years. So we have to understand the scope of what we're talking about. But certainly if there's like key provisions of the town bylaws, the zoning bylaws, or other documents that direct the town, either within the purview of the planning board and obviously through you to other committees, that's sort of like, that's the palette, one of the palettes where change can be painted.
Yeah, if I just want to jump in, I think that one of the things I don't think we have a great feel for are what are the levers in the zoning bylaws which we can pull.
Right.
And that is a legal issue as well as one of imagination. So I think that understanding how other municipalities within Massachusetts in particular have used zoning. I don't know that there's a lot we can do to budge building codes. Building codes flow down from on high as far as I can tell. And, you know, there's a conservatism about building codes because you don't want to put something in your house and discover that it's failed and you have to tear out all your plumbing or something.
But like,
yeah.
like example would be like that a town would say that anybody who puts in new housing that has 6 or more units should have at least one EV charger.
Right. Yeah, that would be something. Yeah. Or we could say, if you build a building with so many units, you have to meet this sort of LEED classification for efficiency, or you need to put in rain gardens, or some of those things I think we have control over. And I think that the key is that we're ignorant, because I don't think any of us really looked at zoning in terms of how it works with sustainability. And I think the other thing that's important is to look at what, the zoning is going to stick around for, hopefully, if we do it right, for 20 plus years, because we don't like to revisit these things. So the question is, what is the environment going to look like over the next 10 to 15 years so that the zoning is flexible enough to handle what's going to happen? So for instance, we know temperatures are going to go up. We're going to have, more severe weather problems. I'm having problems with my earpiece. I apologize. So one of the things would be, as we look forward, what do we have to react to? And how do we make sure the zoning doesn't lock us into something which we have to keep going back every 5 years because we just aren't keeping up with the disasters which are coming down the pike? Okay, I've spoken too much.
I think it's a great input, and I think our committee can talk about it to see if we have any directly applicable skills in the committee. When Ken gets on board, we can raise that to him as an important need that has been expressed by the planning board, which makes a ton of sense to me. And then we'd have to, I think, as you said, Sally, what do we do here in terms of getting our head around it? If it could be a external consultant report that does some benchmarking. I think it's important, to your point, Diab, is there, in this world, there tend to be some emerging practices that say here in 2021 are just getting traction. But if you look at how things have changed over the last decade, by 2031, they could be standard practices. and we got to make sure we think a little bit about and look at what's coming, as you say, to kind of anticipate a bit and continue to be flexible.
I think this is also part of the purview of a sustainability director. It's what they
That's right.
live and breathe and think about. And since we now have one, I think we should have part of how we can all support Ken is to figure out what is the most efficient division of labor, what skills he has directly and what he might be able to get from any of us, committee-wise or individually. But that this is sustainability directors talk about zoning. It's one of their things. So I think it's already on the table. Let's put it that way.
But I think this conversation also helps us elevate it, because one thing, we have many ongoing discussions with Ken about what are his priorities. You can only attack so many things at once, and this seems like it's a very appropriate kind of a very important need for insight here, as expressed by this board.
So I have one other thought about this, but I don't want to pipe up until Cheryl and I Ching and Kurt have had a chance to talk.
I was just curious if you have a list of projects that you're working on right now, just to kind of give me a framework for what, what your capacity is. I'm thinking about, for instance, the built environment and flooding. Those two things are hugely impacted by climate change, and probably the biggest issue we have in the Northeast. So I just don't know what types of things you work on. As far as, what are you working on a particular study right now in the town?
I think the short answer is we're extremely capacity limited. It's a group of 7 volunteers, most of whom have full-time jobs, and some are, I think a couple are raising multiple kids at the same time. So I think of it as an advisory committee where we can be fairly surgical on what we do. Like, for example, we're in the process of planning an EV 101 day to kind of modeled after Lexington, about maybe a session to inform the town and some of the opportunities in EVs and some of the residents of the town and what's happening there. We've spent a fair amount of time in terms of working to get the sustainability director on board, which has been a good accomplishment because it's the first step in the climate action plan. We've done some education of the community around Earth Day. So I would say that, Cheryl, it's somewhat modest projects given the volunteer nature of the committee. And I think we're excited with Ken on board that we can now get some full-time person with more engagement with the town, having that full-time person that we could have possibly achieved over the last 12 months.
Congratulations on that. Great.
I Ching, was that it? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for coming. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm supposed to be the liaison, so
Oh, there we go. We'll be talking to you a lot.
Yeah. So our board has been thinking a lot about the master plan, and I know you have your own document that you're working on, the climate action plan, and I just wonder if you guys have considered how that might intersect, or how you guys could contribute to, the 2030 plan.
May I respond to that? In the interest of time, we didn't talk about the fact that this is the second Climate Action Advisory Committee. The first was created in 2010 and wrote Climate Action Plan 1, which was incorporated into whatever document was at that time being created as a master plan. So literally the verbiage that we had produced in the Climate Action Plan and in our actions, the implementation of the plan went into the then master plan. And I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know what happened to that document. Is that still the document on which you're working, or did that get scrapped? And you're working
the 2030 master plan? No, it's not scrapped.
Well, is that the same master plan that was being worked on in the 2015s and 14s and 13s?
The current
No,
master
Brian's
plan,
shaking his head.
yeah, is a product of, I would say, 2019 and 2020,
That's what I
2018,
thought. Okay.
2019, 2020. Um,
That's
it
all I
was-
need to know. So my point is that these two blueprints and were very tightly integrated at the time, and we would certainly hope to do that again because they're intensely complementary isn't even the right word. I mean, really have a lot of overlap even, and it's great that you say that. I think that would be very much our wish and hope because we have the stuff and you have the stuff and together we can have more stuff. So I think it, yeah.
Well, one of the four pillars, I forget what the actual wording, 4 or 5 pillars in the master plan is sustainability.
Right.
So it's definitely an important part of the plan. So
The thought that I had, well, no, let me not talk until I hear from Kurt. I'm sorry.
and we're going to have to actually pay
Go ahead,
attention to the clock as well. So
Sally, go ahead, please.
Sally, I think you've been given the go ahead.
Okay, well, so when I was like analyzing the master plan, especially the master plan action plan, what Jen Goldson, who's the owner of the firm that created the document with working with Winchester, she identified responsible parties. And there are a number of places where responsible parties include both the planning board and the climate action committee. Or maybe not, actually. The climate action committee might have been one of the committees that wasn't even formed at the time that she was identifying. No, that couldn't possibly be the case. Never mind. So my point was that there are already ready-made topics or strategies that Jen Goldson put a point on that we could collaborate on. And Diab and this board are putting together thoughts about how to create a master plan implementation committee. And so that will be one platform that will help identify all those common grounds that we have between planning and climate action. And so there's lots of guiding documents that we should definitely rely on. And the other thing I wanted to say was, Brian, is it possible that you could get a copy of the 2020 climate action plan to all the planning board members so that we can just read it?
It's on the website.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
no,
it's been published on the website.
Yeah, no, I have it myself, but I didn't know if other people had a chance.
Yep.
To.
If you just search climate action plan, in fact, both of them are there, the first and the second.
Right.
There is one big difference I want to point out to remind you, I think you probably all know this, between Planning Board and Climate Action Advisory Committee. You have a legal mandate and we do not. We are literally a committee formed to advise the select board. We are formed by and serve the select board, which doesn't mean we can't be a fly in the ointment or, nudging. And we see that as being our role is in fact to say, not that, but this. But we do not have a legal mandate and we have no legal power.
Right.
So that is.
You have the power of the bully pulpit.
Well, so here's a perfect example. I just happened to flip open to section 2.4 recommended actions, and it says protect and enhance green space. That is something that the planning board is very interested in doing, and we have the authority to recommend to town meeting laws to do that.
Well, to be honest, anyone can recommend to town meeting. They just hopefully they listen to us more often than the others. But
right.
Yeah.
But so yes, I think there's lots of opportunities to work together.
Yeah. So I unfortunately I think we're going to have to draw this discussion to a conclusion. I think that as both Rick and Priscilla said, this is just the start of, I hope, many conversations going forward as the master plan implementation kicks in. I know that we are going to be asking climate action for their input in how we do things and suggestions on how we can move forward The sustainability director is going to be seated right across the room from Brian. So there will be, I hope, a lot of organic exchange of information. Either that, unless you just really can't stand each other, in which you have my, whatever you have my sorrow. Anyway,
I'm excited. I get what you're saying.
yeah. So thank you very much for coming before us tonight, and hopefully we will see you sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time. Great input, and looking forward to working with you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you much.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Good night.
So now, according to the schedule, we are going to do what we usually do at the beginning, which is to have updates. And we have updates, and we have a few meeting minutes to approve. So why don't we jump into updates? Brian, you usually lead off.
Yeah, I'll go super quick. I don't have much, and I know I Ching had an update as well. Yesterday, there was a focus group meeting with the local rapid recovery plan with members from the chamber, your planning board chair, Diab Jarius, other business owners, and then residents on kind of what types of strategies can help businesses in the short term due to the downturn during COVID in a lot of the businesses in downtown. One thing that actually caught a lot of traction was having some type of a downtown vision for the business landscape. That seemed to be something that everyone really agreed upon, including the chamber, of really having this vision of what the downtown should be and how it relates to the cultural district, and how we can try to get specific types of businesses so that there's more of a branding of downtown, essentially. And the other update that I have is that under the DIAP, the Downtown Improvement Action Plan, that's being advised by Tool Design. So they're going to be coming out with some immediate recommendations that can be implemented now in the form of wayfinding to let everyone know where easily available parking is located within a few minutes walk. And this is going to be in conjunction with the MBTA project in terms of trying to get people to where they need to park during this kind of weird and crazy time during the construction. That's all I have for now. I guess back to I Ching.
I have some updates on the schools. There's a lot of upheaval sort of in the use of space and thinking about land use and space use. And so the Lynch project, they shortlisted 3 architects, and they're going to be interviewing them. And then the central office administration building is being reconsidered to move out of Parkhurst. And there were 3 options, and one was to rent something downtown and lease some space, or 2 was to incorporate it into Lynch's new building. And the third one was to use the carriage house next to Ambrose. And reuse that space and make it so. And so that they had a meeting today. Select board had a meeting yesterday, and they approved giving them the go ahead to go design development if the school committee wants to do that. And then this tonight, I don't know how they voted tonight, but the school committee was trying to figure out which way to go.
So just to clarify that, I Ching, that it's that they're approving design development for the carriage house, right?
Oh, specifically, yeah. But that's to why I
just because they don't have funding to do the project, but they're going to spend money on design development. That's like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. Sorry.
The project has to go, and the central administration office has to go somewhere. And so the town is on the hook for paying it, whether or not it's in Lynch or a lease building or in at the carriage house. So,
Cheryl, you're coming from your perspective as a liaison to the Capitol.
Yeah, and we turned them down, so they got it. They went to the select board. That's fine. I just it's they're gonna, if they don't use. It's not like doing schematic design. So, they've done the programming and the schematic design. They know they've got a ballpark of what it's going to cost to do the carriage house. if they sink money into DD, design development, they might as well just throw it on a bonfire, unless they know they're doing the project. And right now it's not, it's, an $8 million project. Nobody's.
No, I think they estimated it to be $4 million or $2 million contingency as of now. But things, costs will go.
Construction cost?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was much higher than that.
No,
possibly.
That's what Chris Nixon was telling me is. I mean, my husband's on the EFPBC board also.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, they definitely they really want the carriage house. So I think, if it's a good project, they should just make it a project. But anyway, whatever.
Whatever they get there.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like a great idea.
So the only other thing I wanted to bring up is that there was a working group of the Waterfield Lot Task Force last Friday morning. Was it Friday morning? It was Friday morning. There is, and I wasn't prepared to give us a summary of that, so I apologize. There will be another working group tomorrow morning, I believe at 9.
Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, it's hold on. So it's tomorrow actually at 10.
10.
It's just from 10 to 11, and then there's our next meeting is on Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m.
Okay, so I know.
More important, I guess this was an update. Sorry. More importantly, the select board last night voted to extend the task force 2 weeks, so that the task force is going to be presenting in front of the select board now on October 18th.
And they're going to present their ranking.
But I mean, the ranking and report. It's really
right.
Their recommendations for. I mean, if there's things that are unknown, they would say that to, find these pieces of information out before, as you're negotiating. But it seems like Civico is ready to negotiate. They're talking. Have their eye and ears on these task force meetings and are aware of what's being talked about. And our consultant, Lynn Sweet, has been discussing these finer details with them.
So if you can, they are very interesting discussions. It gives you an eye into different perspectives on this project. And I just want to note that Brian's role in this, we had hoped he would have a more minor role, but Brian is now the cat herder, and he is running the meetings, and he is doing an exemplary job. So,
I second that.
Thank you, Brian. And you can see that grimace, which says he hopes it's all over soon, because he's been spending a lot of time on this. Okay, so in order to get us out before midnight, why don't we switch to minute approvals? I think we can get this done, and then we can all toddle off to our whatever we want to do. So Brian, if you would please pop up our packet so we can take a look at the notes. And Kurt, lucky you do not have to vote on this, but the rest of us do, because you were not at these meetings.
Yeah, so I'm here in the packet, but it does not.
The minutes are at the very end, and one of the things that happened when the packet was produced is that the minutes were printed or scanned to fit to an 11 by 17 page. So like when I printed them out, my husband has an 11 by 17 printer. So I printed them out, and then he just cut the paper in half, because otherwise it would have been little tiny boxes. Because I like to read paper because it helps me mark up and share thoughts with myself.
So the version that I have does not have those minutes. I have to get that from. You're going to have to give me a minute.
I couldn't find them either.
It's in the Dropbox.
Hold on. So I Suzanne Gill does not send all of the minutes to the outside group unless they request it. So I just think, sorry, I have to get.
I have the minutes at the end of my packet. Did you want me to?
That's right, the packet.
Yeah,
No,
should you, I'll let you share your screen, Cheryl.
Can I ask a quick question about the packet? I did.
Sure.
I know she sent an email saying, or I got the email saying that she sends them out, I guess, the
Friday before.
So did I just not get this one because I didn't have an email set up?
My guess. Well, you still should have gotten it. It still should have gotten to your Gmail account just for this last time. But I'm guessing that didn't happen.
I don't think it did.
Okay, I will make sure that doesn't happen again.
You make sure he gets today's packet.
Yeah, no, sure. And now he's on the planning board distribution list, so that it won't. I mean, that part won't happen again because the email address was just set up. These, unfortunately, Cheryl, are super. I'm as big as I can make it, but are illegible.
There we go.
You guys see it?
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, I can, but I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we start with August 24th, 2021? Are there any alterations of substantive nature?
I have one question on page 3. Under the bulleted section under discussion, I read this through and I'm remembering the conversation, and I got to the bullet that's close, sort of 2/3, or maybe, well, it's just there. We want to avoid triple deckers where it looks like a 3-story building. Well, so that's a really interesting comment, and it kind of aligns with some of the recommendations that were touched on in the North Main Street report. But I don't know that saying that was part of our discussion. It just feels like a really strong prohibition.
That was in relation to the half story and the height, not related to North Main Street. It was the idea that having full shed dormers so that it made it look like a 3-story triple decker is not what the 2.5-story zoning contemplated. So this is not related to North Main Street.
Okay, so then I understand it now, and I have no other edits to the minutes of August 24th.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the planning board minutes for August 24th of 2021? Brian, can you show us who is present so we can make sure that we have a quorum?
I'm going to be Cheryl for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl. If you could scroll to the top, please. And we have enough to make a quorum. Excellent. Okay, so is there a motion to approve planning board meeting minutes Tuesday, August 24th, 2021?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I can second.
Oh, Sally, you can do it.
I second.
Excellent. Roll call vote, please. Cheryl Wolf?
Aye.
Sally Dale?
Aye.
Eeching Scott?
Aye.
Diabjurius, aye. 4-0. 1 abstention. Thank you much. If we can go to the next one, please. So here we are, Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. Any changes?
I just have a question about the agenda for that night, because I don't have it in front of me, but both of the minutes for August 31st say 7:30, but the public hearing went from a time to a time and then was closed, and then the planning board meeting started after that, and I didn't know if it should say 7:30 at the top of the one that's just planning board.
It should be, no, if it's just the planning board, then it should be at the time it actually started. The one before us is for the public hearing.
Right. So this one, did we start it right at 7 or whatever? I mean, it was scheduled to be 7:30.
According to this, is we started it at 7:34.
Okay, good. So then it's the other minutes that would have a different time at the top. I just got confused about that.
So any amendments to these minutes?
Pretty short.
I'm going to take it that, does that mean you think they are lacking, or they are well written and concise?
Let's the meeting closed at 8:02, so maybe that's why.
We did have a short meeting, and I think we did have to, we had fewer people commenting than we thought.
Yeah,
And
we
this
just
is,
had one public comment.
yeah, and this is why I owe Brian ice cream, because I thought it would last at least 40 minutes, and it
Yeah.
lasted for less than 30. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the minutes for Tuesday, August 31st, 2021, for the public hearing at 7:30?
So moved.
Is
Second.
there a second?
Done.
Can you, Brian, could you scroll back up? Or I'm sorry, Cheryl, please scroll back up so we can see whether we have a quorum. And the answer is we do. So let's go through roll call vote. I Ching Scott,
Aye.
Cheryl Wolf,
Aye.
Sally Dale,
Aye.
Diab Jarius, aye, 4-0, one abstention. And I think we have one more. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we know that this one,
Wait, is this the same one?
No, that's what I got confused about. So this is the public hearing one, and then there's another one that says August 31st at 7:30. That's just the planning board meeting.
Right,
the
it should
top?
say start, it should start at 8:08, whatever.
two, yeah.
Oh,
So-
okay. So where it says 7:30,
Let's just call it 8.
Yeah,
So
I
the,
think
so
8.
let's amend the time on the, hey, Nancy, are you getting all this? Nancy. Okay, we'll let Nancy know. Nancy is away from keyboard.
No, I'm not. I'm here.
Okay,
But my understanding was you opened the planning board meeting and your first agenda item was the public hearing.
Which is what you're saying here, correct?
Exactly.
And it went from
Oh.
7:34 to 8:02. Look at
oh, I
that.
see it. I see it. I see it.
okay, this is a detail that I will defer to Nancy on in terms of how we should write this up.
Right. Other than that, I didn't have any edits except on number 8 on page 2, the second bullet. It was that Diab and Brian met with Ms. Von Mering. Oh, and it says that right there. Okay.
Yep.
Zakali and Jarius. Okay, I have no other edits.
Okay, well, thank you for that explanation, Nancy. And I'm happy with that explanation. Any other concerns on this document? I'm gonna guess nobody. So why don't we, is there a motion to approve planning board meeting minutes Tuesday, August 31st, 2021?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please. I Ching Scott,
Aye.
Cheryl Wolf,
Aye.
Sally Dale,
I
Jarius, aye, 4-0, one abstention. And I believe that is it, correct? Okay. So is there a motion to adjourn?
move to adjourn the planning board meeting.
Is there a second? Somebody seconded it.
Second.
Okay. Everyone seconds it. It wasn't that bad of a meeting. Okay.
That was a great meeting.
Roll call vote, please. Kurt,
Aye.
I Ching,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Sally,
I
and Diab says aye as well. Thank you to our recording secretary, Nancy Polcari. Thank you to Brian Zakelli.
Thank
our
you,
town
Nancy.
engineer.